Hello, my friend. This is Clyde. In God we trust. Really? This is the national motto of the United States, and it is found on every banknote and coin and even on some federal government buildings. In God we trust. In the fourth stanza of the Star-Spangled Banner is found the line, "And this be our motto, in God is our trust." You might be interested to know that that line is closely related to Psalm 56 verses 10 and 11. In God, whose word I praise, in the Lord, whose word I praise, in God I trust and am not afraid. What can man do to me? What does it mean to trust in God? I think that it is easier said than done. To trust in God is to know God and believe that God cares about you, that God is able to do way more than you can do for yourself. To trust God is to admit that there are some things and some circumstances that are way bigger than you are able to handle, or problems bigger than you can solve. And so in those moments, you trust in God. Well, let us look at 3 tough situations from the Bible, similar in some respects, but tough nonetheless. We start with a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, and his 12-year-old daughter who is not just sick, but the Bible says she was dying. You find the story in Luke chapter 8, and Jesus had just returned to Galilee and was met by a large crowd. And in that crowd was this father who came and fell at the feet of Jesus, practically begging him to ignore all the others who were clamoring for his attention and come directly to his house to heal his dying daughter. That is trust. But Jesus is not exempt from drama. And so on the way, this woman who did not have an appointment with Jesus, who did not come to Jesus directly, she slowed him down by touching his clothes, and she was healed of an incurable blood disease. Don't you just love when you have an urgent case and someone jumps ahead of you in the line with their old problem? Well, as fate would have it, Jairus' daughter died before Jesus could resume the walk to the house, and with her died Jairus' trust. No need to trust Jesus anymore. She's dead. But you know Jesus, right? Don't worry, just believe, just trust in me. She will be healed. Jesus, 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 you don't seem to understand. My daughter is dead. How can you heal a dead girl? I will now have to go make arrangements to bury my daughter by tomorrow. Jesus heard those thoughts, but Jesus was already acting on the original request, and so he carried on to the house and went to the room where the deceased lay cold on her bed. And in the strangest of action, he took her by the hand and said, "My child, get up." She came back to life. Jairus had a little trust. The servants had less trust. And the people at the house had no trust. But Jesus worked with the original trust that Jairus had, and he brought his daughter back to life. The second story was different. This time, the only son of a widow in this village named Nain had died, and a large crowd was going to the cemetery to bury this poor woman's son. First her husband died, and now her only child, he has died too. Her whole future died with him. No chance of a grandchild, and probably no one to take care of her. Jesus turned up and saw her crying and said to her, "Don't cry." Now, if you know Jesus, no problem is too big, no problem is too serious that he can't deal with. But how can you say to a widow about to bury her only son, "Don't cry"? What are you suggesting, Jesus? I'm talking to you when you are facing a dead situation. All hope is gone and you are heartbroken. You are in a mess, and someone, maybe a Christian brother or sister, tells you, "Don't cry, just trust God." Please don't tell me what you would say to them, because I know. It is easy for Jesus to say, "Don't cry," but he doesn't know what I'm dealing with right now. Let's see what happens next. Jesus goes up and touched the bier on which the dead body was, and the pallbearers stopped. Remember that he told the mom, "Don't cry." What he did not say but could have said is, "Trust me, I'm about to fix your dead problem." This would be hard to swallow because this is not like Jairus' daughter. This boy died probably the day before. He is very dead. My situation is of such that there is nothing that can be done. So when you tell me to trust in Jesus, I will say yes with my mouth, but the reality in my heart is that this is impossible, that I cannot trust in God at this stage. Oh, by the way, the dead man sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. Read Luke 7, verses 11 to 17. But there are some major, huge, gigantic situations that we deal with that it is useless telling me to trust in God. Like when Lazarus died and Jesus turned up 4 days after the burial. Let me explain how ridiculous it is. If Jesus had come when he was sick and alive, back then we had total trust that Jesus could touch him, could speak a word, and he would be healed. Maybe, possibly, if Jesus had come before we buried him, maybe we could trust Jesus to raise him up. But this is 4 days. 4 days after he was wrapped from head to toe and buried. 4 days he has been in the grave that was sealed. 4 long days. Nobody puts their trust in Jesus when he turns up days after the matter has been settled and not in your favor. Like the house that was in foreclosure has been sold. Like when the doctors tell you that you are stage 4 cancer and there's nothing else that they can do. The man that you were trusting God to marry or was now married to another woman over a month ago. The prize you were hoping to win has been won by someone else. It has passed time for trusting. Nothing can be done now. But Jesus is here. And he's saying to the Marys and the Marthas, and you, trust me. Do you sometimes have the thought that Jesus doesn't really understand your disappointment for something that you have lost and that it is not coming back? Even though our trust in him died the day Lazarus died, Jesus is here and he is about to do something impossible. Yes, you heard me. He is about to do something impossible. So that day he asked them to remove the cover from the grave. Nothing is impossible with God. He called out, "Lazarus, come forth." Nothing is impossible with God. Your impossible is God's possibility. So Lazarus, the man who was buried 4 days ago, the thing that seemed hopeless and impossible, Lazarus came back to life. Read John 11, 1 to 44. Do you see where I am going? I know that some things are easy to trust God for, but life is not always easy, and sometimes we face some problems that are difficult to trust God to fix. But Jesus heard your cry the first time, like he heard Jairus' request to come heal the girl who was dying but not dead. You can trust him even when he tells you don't cry, like the woman who was about to bury her son. And you can trust him when all hope is gone, when your problem has been buried and squared away, because Jesus is that good. He can restore dead things. He can open shut doors. He can calm storms, and he can come true for you in your most difficult moments. Please, my friend, I know it is difficult to hear when you are facing the toughest of situations, but listen to me. Recite Psalm 56, verse 11. In God I trust and am not afraid.